Please listen carefully.
Hello, my name is Karen Christine Patrick, and this is a special podcast on AQUARIANradio.com. Hi, this is Karen Christine Patrick, and I'm reporting about the Gallup, New Mexico UFO Film Festival, which is going to be fun if you're a UFO enthusiast, experiencer. Let's see, it's the 13th annual UFO Film Festival. It will be at the El Morro Theater, and you can get more information from www.chuckwade.com. Chuck, W-A-D-E, chuckwade.ufo.com. In honor of this film festival, Bret, Sheppard, and myself actually traveled to Gallup, New Mexico to interview Chuck Wade and his wife, Nancy, and they were a wealth of information. They have been, Chuck has been working with a team of people to uncover the reality of the crash in Saint Augustine, which is part of New Mexico. I think it's the southwestern New Mexico. And a lot of people know about Roswell, but there was actually more than one UFO crash in New Mexico, and I believe this particular one in Saint Augustine was in 1947. And there's been, Chuck has this team going out and with metal detectors and walking in a line and doing whatever it takes to find artifacts. And he's found some amazing artifacts. And Bret and I got to actually hold them, look at them, take pictures of them, and get information from Chuck on what possibly this is. And right off the bat, you see this and you think, wait a minute, this is not something I've ever seen before. So Bret and I are going to share what we learned right now about this crash. And the first thing I want to talk about is the metal. I happen to know about the Roswell crash and the story of June Crane, who was an eyewitness when the material from the Roswell crash ended up in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and a admirer or something like that, a gentleman was flirting with June Crane. She's a pretty secretary there, and we'd call her an administrative assistant these days. She actually had more capacity than just a secretary. And he showed her this foil that was found on the crash, and it was an incredible material. You couldn't cut it, you couldn't bend it, you couldn't crinkle it. If you did, it popped right back into shape. Some of the material that we saw was kind of a thin aluminum. It's definitely been tested chemically, so it is aluminum. It's about a 1/16 of an inch thick or so, up to an eighth. I'm not certain about that. And I talked to Nancy, and she showed me some photographs of where they had looked at it with an electron microscope. They'd flattened the edges of one of the pieces, and that was totally fascinating because, yes, it was aluminum. Okay, there you go. But it had flecks of other material in it. And as she explained it, she says this wasn't melted in or anything like that. It was actually embedded into the material, and some of it was silicon, some of it was carbon, some of it was other materials, and it turned out that there was like up to over 40 different materials embedded in this thin sheet of aluminum. And she said it looked like if you had soup and you had the vegetables, it'd be like chunky. It wasn't smoothly embedded. So there's something about the materials in that microfleck format that's important to the discussion, important into the discovery. It was very, very unusual material. There really isn't anything like that on Earth. And I'm certain that our visitors from space know what aluminum is, so that's good. On this aluminum sheeting, there's these brownish octagon, hexagon shaped dots that are like probably 1/4 of an inch. And there's another material that looks like corrugated aluminum. It's quite thick. It's probably about 3 inches thick. And there's one piece where this material looks basically like a type of fabric, insulated fabric. And it has, you can see the stitching on it. It looks very, very, we would call it a microfiber today. And given the fact that it was found in 1947, microfiber began to be developed shortly or during and shortly after World War II, which was a real big time for them developing materials that they could possibly use in the war effort. So the fact that this was discovered in that era is pretty advanced. And you kind of get the feeling with this material that it was either a binder or just an insulated material between the aluminum sheets and the corrugated aluminum, I guess, insulation, for lack of a better word. Right now I'm going to pass the microphone over to Bret Sheppard and get his input on our visit with Chuck and Nancy Wade.
Hello, this is Bret Sheppard, and there's quite a few things I can say about the materials in detail. Chuck Wade and his wife Nancy were very sweet and adorable, actually, and they had so much information about this 1949 crash. One of the objects was made out of a very complex plastic-like Kevlar, and it was a very small artificial heart. That is one of the interesting things that were discovered there. The other pieces, one of them, the one that Karen was describing with the microfibers, it didn't just have fibers but also metallic fibers weaved into it. And they were scanned with an electron microscope, and it was noted that there were actually nanodiodes attached to the metal wires, and they were 3 times thinner than a human hair. So in 1949, I highly doubt that we had that kind of technology without some kind of advanced intervening, by our star neighbors or whoever, an advanced race here on Earth or something. That, in particular, that the fibers that were shown were in a honeycomb pattern, and it was a corrugated type metal that was fairly thick, just like a honeycomb sort of, except for the honeycombs were very, very tiny. And the corrugated material was folded in with these metallic fibers, and it's very suggestive that the metallic fiber-like material is similar to that of the material you would find in an old wire. That's what it kind of looked like, except for it was a nano-like material. It wasn't as blatant as that. And it seemed to have been like a flash guard or a guard for an electrical type reaction or a magnetic type reaction. So it's very indicative, the way this material was, to be very conducive to magnetic vortexes. and that's the way this stuff was. And then there was an outer shell, which I would assume is a type of casing for this material. First there was the casing, then there was the microfiber-like material, and then the honeycomb type material, and they sort of go together in that arrangement. But I can imagine that this the corrugated material, you were able to, if you were an engineer, you were able to actually make that round, and the stuff would still work. So that's one of the things that I noticed about the crash material. Aside from the weight of it was extraordinarily light. It was lighter than aluminum, I would say. And we don't really have a complex type of aluminum that fits that description on Earth. And it, apparently under an electron microscope, it was tested, and it has silicon in it and different fiber-like material combinations with diodes embedded in there. And these were all over that material, so it's very apparent that the entire craft was made, at least the outer part of this craft was made out of that substance. It's very interesting.
Thank you, Bret, for that insight. And I happened to get a sort of a theory, just looking at this material, and it looks like it's been under extreme stress. One of the aluminum pieces had folds in it like fabric from some kind of an impact, and it looks like that the corrugated material had broken off of this outer layer material, and due to these flecks that were embedded in this outer aluminum material, we happen to have a research friend named Clyde Crisp, who's quite the expert on orgonite or orgone, and he makes orgonite. We had a piece with us, but I couldn't dig it out and show it to Chuck and Nancy because we were traveling. And so that's what it reminded me of, because I've seen different artists and alchemists, I guess you say, creating orgonite, and that's exactly what they do. They take either resin material, acrylic, and they embed different crystals and different metallic things like copper and iron flecks, and create a vortex pattern. And what that does, what orgonite does, is it increases the vortex energy around it, bringing in negative ions, and this substance called orgone, which is positive to biological life. So the idea of orgonite is to work at the energetic subtle level to increase life energy. That's what it kind of basically does. And it accelerates any kind of vortex wave pattern. And that's kind of interesting to me, because that's what I thought of when I saw this embedded material. And we were shown a chart of the table of elements showing all of the elements that were in this material. It was impressive. And that's the impression I got, is that this material accelerates vortex energy. And if you accelerate vortex energy, electrogravitic propulsion, it basically creates a space bubble. It creates its own local environment. It's no longer attached or being pulled by a gravity of a planet or a moon or anything like that. It has its own local little universe in a space bubble. And that's how I believe that UFOs disc craft, which the curvature of the material indicates it did have a bit of a curve to it, is actually the propulsion, if you will, is to create its own gravity, its own space, and then you simply take the singularity of this vortex, this toroidal field, and put it where you want to go. And it's important that it works that way, because I've actually seen a UFO do a 90-degree turn. I was watching what I thought was the ISS satellite. It was right in the same path as the ISS. And I go, oh, there's the ISS, the International Space Station, going by. And then suddenly this thing took an absolute perfect 90-degree turn. And if you had any people inside that thing, if there wasn't some way to have its own localized gravity and environment, they'd be splashed flat against the wall of the craft from inertia. So this is what I think is happening, is this material is assisting the drive to create a high-level vortex, which creates a space bubble. And Bret wanted to add his points just right now.
There was also an I-beam, a partial I-beam that Chuck didn't bring to show us. That's a kind of a secretive thing. He just wants to protect it, perhaps, or he couldn't find it. Buried in the amount of material that he's collected from the site. But on this particular little piece of I-beam, there's a triangle with a circle in it, and that's the symbol that's on the I-beam. And it looks exactly like the shape of the Belgian triangular UFO that people had seen with the circular shape in the middle that was lighting up. There's other things that look like that on Earth. The Eye of Horus inside the capstone looked similar to this. Maybe the ancients knew something about this type of a portal, which is what I think it is. I think it's indicative to some kind of portal, or a reference to the inner space that this ship was traveling in. And that's just something that I wanted to add.
Yes, thank you, Bret. We really didn't know a lot about this case until we talked to Chuck, and he's had quite a few researchers come and look at his material, but nobody's really taken it on. And I mean, he's done writing. He worked with other authors. He worked with Art Campbell, who's been studying it a bit longer than Chuck. And, basically Chuck said that, I want to know how this thing flies. He's an engineer, and that's his curiosity about this thing, is how did it actually achieve its ability to fly and maneuver the way that we've seen craft maneuver. And some other interesting artifacts that he had was an old license plate, New Mexico license plate, and he had a canteen with somebody's name scrawled on it. But basically, there was indications and other artifacts that show that out in the middle of nowhere, there in southwestern New Mexico, the military was out there for some reason. So, there was artifacts of military involvement at the crash site, meaning that somehow or another it did get reported. The military maybe absconded with the bigger pieces of this thing, but they didn't get everything, and researchers are picking up the pieces. And just like when a plane crashes, they reassemble it to see kind of what happened. Maybe that's what they've done to see, why did it crash. It's hard to say. Why did the craft, it's so advanced, crash at Roswell? That's a big question. We don't know. But the main thing is that the feeling I got was, Nancy and Chuck are experiencers of the research kind. I'm an experiencer. Bret is an experiencer. Sometimes researchers who haven't even seen a UFO don't think of themselves as experiencers. But that would be like James Clarkson. I saw his talk at Roswell, and he's the director of MUFON in Washington State. And he basically said, I've not seen them, but I've researched them for over 25 years, and the preponderance of the evidence shows that we are being visited, and the evidence shows it. And so I would put Chuck and Nancy in that same category. They're finding pieces of the puzzle for all of us together to put together to find out, who's visiting us, and help us understand what's behind the green curtain. And that's a term I came up with not too long ago, meaning that we're at the stage collectively of curiosity, but not really that much knowledge. And at some point, with the visitors coming and contacting people and experiencers and researchers, we're eventually going to come to a collective knowledge about our visitors, extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, underground civilization, breakaway civilization, and the paradigm galactic. And when that happens, we'll be on the other side of the green curtain, and it's going to be very interesting. We'll probably find out more about ourselves than anything else, who we are, where did we come from, and our history, and maybe we'll even meet the beings that sent these craft, and they'll tell us more about it. So it's an exciting time to be, looking at these cases and talking to witnesses and researchers. And we just had a great time talking with Chuck and Nancy, and I just encourage anybody who's going through Gallup, or we won't be able to go during the UFO festival. We got asked to speak at the one next year, the 14th annual, so that's fun. So yeah, anyone who's going to be near Gallup, New Mexico, October 14th, 15th, go to chuckwadeufo.com for more information. And I don't even know what shows they're going to show, films, and I don't know what visitors or speakers they're going to have. But these are, for experiencers, these are family reunions. So you need to go if you're nearby. Okay, signing off. This is Karen Christine Patrick from Aquarian Radio. This was a special podcast of Aquarian Radio. Visit us at aquarianradio.com. I want to thank Janet Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin for providing a wonderful network. I also want to thank the Free Music Archive and the artist Jazzar, Jazzhar, for the wonderful music that was in this program. Stay tuned for more. Thank you.